A boy in third grade can't sit still. His leg won't stop bouncing. His eyes drift to a bird outside the window. By the end of the lesson, he's the problem child again. But what if his brain isn't broken? What if it's built for a different world entirely? There's a name for this idea. The hunter versus farmer hypothesis, developed by the writer Tom Hartman. Hartman argues that people with ADHD aren't disordered at all. They're hunters, dropped into a farmer's world. The same traits we now label as symptoms: restlessness, impulsivity, a hunger for novelty, a constant scanning of the environment were exactly what a hunter-gatherer needed to survive. Hartman even traces it back further, suggesting some catastrophic shift around 40,000 years ago may have pushed this kind of brain into existence. He calls it the Edison gene. Not a flaw, a specialization. That's a compelling theory. But is there any real evidence behind it? In 2008, researchers Dan Eisenberg and Benjamin Campbell went looking for an answer in northern Kenya, among a population called the Arial. Some Arial still live as nomads, herding livestock across open land. Others had settled into farming villages a few decades earlier. The researchers were looking for a specific gene, the DRD47R allele, a variant linked to ADHD symptoms, novelty-seeking, and impulsivity. About 1 in 5 men in each group carried it. And here's where it gets interesting. Among the nomads, men with the gene were healthier, higher body mass, more muscle, better nutrition than nomads without it. Among the settled farmers, that same gene predicted the opposite: worse nutrition, poorer health. Eisenberg put it simply: a boy with this allele might defend livestock or track down water more effectively, but that same impulsiveness doesn't help much when you're sitting at a desk, farming a field, or running a shop. Same gene, opposite outcome. It just depends which world you're standing in. It would be neat if the story ended there. But in 2025, a follow-up study tried to push it further, looking at children instead of adults. Researchers genotyped over 250 Rendile children, a population closely related to the Arial. This time, the link between the gene and physical health disappeared. What did show up was something stranger. The gene was tied to household economic status. The children with the variant tended to come from better-off families. But the researchers suspect it isn't really about the children at all, it's the parents. A parent carrying that same impulsive, opportunity-seizing gene might simply run a more successful household. The advantage is still there. It's just operating 1 generation removed. And then, in 2024, came the experiment that finally put this whole idea to a direct test. A researcher named David Barak designed something simple: an online foraging game. Hundreds of participants could keep collecting rewards from a single, slowly depleting source, or abandon it and search for a fresh one. Everyone also completed a screening for ADHD traits. The people who screened positive left the depleting source sooner. Every time. They got bored faster, moved on faster. And here's the part that should stop you. They ended up collecting more rewards overall, not despite leaving early. Because of it. The researchers concluded that ADHD traits may reflect an adaptation favoring exploration over exploitation. A brain wired not to stay, but to leave before the place it's standing in runs dry. Which makes the name itself almost a cruel joke. Attention deficit. But ask anyone who actually has ADHD, and they'll describe something else entirely: hours disappearing into a project they care about, the rest of the world fading out completely. It's called hyperfocus. And it isn't a contradiction. It's the same system, doing what it was built to do. The ADHD brain doesn't lack attention. It regulates it differently, locking on to what matters and discarding what doesn't. On the savannah, that might mean fixing on a moving shape in the grass, or a sound that doesn't belong. In a classroom, the thing that matters is rarely the lesson, so the focus goes somewhere else. The mechanism never broke. The target moved. Put all of this together, and a pattern starts to take shape. ADHD traits are highly heritable, passed down with the kind of consistency that suggests they were once selected for, not against. Evolutionary psychiatry has a name for what's happening now: mismatch. A brain shaped by tens of thousands of years of foraging, scanning, and rapid decision-making dropped into sedentary classrooms and fluorescent-lit offices it was never designed for. The theory predicts these traits should help most under conditions that are time-critical, novel, and resource-scarce conditions that describe a hunting trip far better than they describe a math worksheet. But here's where the story takes an uncomfortable turn. If ADHD is really about brain wiring, age shouldn't matter much, except it does enormously. Swedish National Registry data on nearly 300,000 children found that simply being among the youngest in your class raises your odds of an ADHD diagnosis by 70%. Not a different brain. A few extra months of immaturity, standing next to classmates who've had more time to grow. Which raises an uncomfortable question. How many ADHD diagnoses are actually measuring a disorder, and how many are measuring nothing more than how young a child happened to be in September? And the label itself is younger than you'd think. ADHD wasn't formally defined until 1968, in the second edition of the DSM, under the name hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. The assumption then was that hyperactivity came from family environment, and that it would simply disappear by adolescence. It took until 1987 for the term ADHD to even exist, so the traits themselves, the restlessness, the scanning, the hunger for novelty, are likely tens of thousands of years old. The category we use to judge them is younger than most grandparents alive today. Russell Barkley, one of the most cited researchers in the field, frames it slightly differently. He argues ADHD isn't really about attention at all. It's about executive function, the brain's capacity for self-regulation. And he traces that capacity back to a specific evolutionary pressure: living in larger groups of genetically unrelated people, where holding yourself back actually mattered. In smaller, simpler environments, with fewer demands for sitting still and delaying gratification, that same trait might never have registered as a problem at all. It might have just been someone's personality. So go back to that boy in third grade, leg bouncing, eyes on the window. He isn't broken. He's running software built for open land, rivers, and moving prey installed into a body sitting in a fluorescent room, being asked to sit still for 6 hours a day. The brain didn't change. The world around it did.